There's an old cliche about the hermit artist, the creative genius who turns their back on fame and fortune in order to live a life of secrecy and creative isolation. J.D. Salinger fits that stereotype so closely, it's almost as if it was written about him to begin with. Most famous for his novel, The Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger was a novelist and short story writer who, during the 1960s, was one of the most famous writers in the world. He also spent roughly the last 4 decades of his life as a recluse, living purposefully away from the eyes of the public. The last official publication of his writing came in 1965, a full 45 years before his death in 2010. However, it is well known that despite never publishing anything further, Salinger continued to write prolifically for the rest of his life. So today on Out of the Page, I want to take a look at what we know and what we can expect from the lost works of J.D. Salinger. For those who need a background, J.D. Salinger was an American author born in 1919, shortly after the end of World War I. He was raised in New York City and had his first short story published when he was a college student at the age of 21. His writing career took off in the mid-1940s when his stories were featured in The New Yorker, many of which featured members of the Glass family. He served the US military in the Second World War, and his first-hand experiences of the horrors of war shaped some of the pessimism in his writing. In 1951, he published his first and only full-length novel, The Catcher in the Rye, which was an instant success. The disaffected and cynical narrator, Holden Caulfield, was subsequently seen as the voice of the post-war generation, and this made Salinger a star. He was never comfortable with this though, and became increasingly reluctant to put himself in the public eye. He began experimenting with different religions and spiritual beliefs, and left New York for a small town in New Hampshire. By the publication of Franny and Zoe in 1961, he was already regarded as a recluse, and was rarely giving interviews. His last official publication was in 1965, and after that, he disappeared almost entirely to a life of anonymity and obscurity. In 1986, Salinger was involved in a legal dispute over the intended publication of some of his letters, and through this process, it was revealed to the public for the first time that despite 20 years of silence, he'd never stopped writing. There were reports over the following decades of friends and neighbors speaking to Salinger about writing, and he was apparently open about the fact that he was still producing novels and short stories. Allegedly, he'd categorized them and coded them, indicating those still in progress and those ready for publication. However, it is also clear that he did not intend to publish anything further in his lifetime. So when Salinger died in 2010, rumors swirled about the content of these lost works. Were they novels or short stories? What were they about? And importantly, when would we get to read them? Now, the rumors circulated for a few years, but nothing ever really came of them. And then in 2013, a documentary film called Salinger was released by 2 filmmakers who had spent 9 years interviewing family and friends and researching the writer. At the end of the documentary, they made a bold claim, which was that Salinger had prepared 5 novels for publication, and he'd even given a timeline for publication to his publishers. Allegedly, these were to be released between 2015 and 2020. These claims were swiftly rejected by Salinger's estate, who, although they didn't say too much, did say that the claims were fictional and the sources were unreliable. The sources, of course, were kept anonymous, but supposing they held any weight at all, they do offer some insight into what it was Salinger had been writing for so many years. Apparently, he never really strayed too far away from what he'd been writing in his earlier days. Some of the books allegedly continued to feature characters from the Glass family, and Holden Caulfield was said to be the main character of one of his unpublished novels. Unfortunately, after all of this, the trail went cold once again, and for 6 years, we heard pretty much nothing. Occasionally, articles would pop up reminding everyone that these mystery books were still out there, but Salinger's estate had gone quiet, and the industry slowly began to move on. Then, in 2019, Salinger's son broke the silence. He agreed to an interview with The Guardian and was more candid than Salinger's estate had ever been. He reiterated that the 2013 claims were baseless, but did confirm his father had continued to write voraciously for his entire life. He even recounted Salinger often pulling over the car to jot down ideas and always keeping a notebook next to every chair in the house. He also confirmed that most of what his father had continued to write had actually gone unread by anyone prior to his death. His estate were only given the opportunity to start assessing this work in 2011, and apparently were very surprised by the volume of what they found. This was evidently the reason for the delays. He finally went on to say that while the estate was studiously readying the books for publication, they weren't going to see the light of day anytime soon. And when he was pushed for a time frame, he gave 10 years. That interview was back at the start of 2019, about 2 years ago as of the filming of this video. Since then, the trail has gone quiet once more, and who knows when it will pick up again. So let's summarize what we do know. J.D. Salinger, in all his years off the map, continued to write and to write a lot. What he wrote included characters from his already published works and were a mix of novels and short stories. And if we're lucky, we should start seeing these by the time 2030 arrives, 2 decades after his death. There is just so much unknown about his unpublished works. I feel like every year that passes just adds another layer of pressure and expectation. Did he manage to actually keep up the same quality of writing over all of those years? Is he still able to connect to a modern audience after so long away from the limelight? And frankly, for someone whose reputation has already been set in stone for so many decades, will any new additions to his canon challenge that? I am fascinated by the mystery of these unpublished works, and I find myself searching for leaks and updates every few months over the years. In that regard, I can tell you that the last decade has been a pretty long one, but I'm not giving up hope, and in that I know I'm not alone. It's a weird thing to say, but I hope this video soon becomes outdated. I hope that in a few years' time, the elusive, unpublished writings of J.D. Salinger see the light of day, and much of what I say here today becomes redundant, because that would mean that we would finally have access to the lost works of a great genius, and maybe, just maybe, we will get to hear what the voice of a generation has been waiting so long to say. Thank you for watching this video, and if you too are fascinated by the mystery of these lost writings, I've tried to summarize what we know as of the end of 2020. So I hope you found it useful, and if you've got your own theories as to what his works contain, I'd love to hear them, so toss them into the comments. So that's it for me today. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Have a good week or weeks, and I will see you later.